Today, we have an incredible guest joining us, someone who has mastered the art of leadership through personal reinvention and helping others discover their own potential. Yaron started his career in IT and project management, but found his true calling as a leadership coach, guiding professionals through transformation and growth. Based outside Paris, Yaron has a unique global perspective, having worked with leaders across industries, including an inspiring stint in India. His approach is all about balancing empathy with accountability, making him a standout in the coaching world. Beyond his professional achievements, Yaron is a dedicated father of two teenagers, an avid runner, having completed the Paris Marathon, and someone who understands the importance of work-life balance. His own journey from burnout to breakthrough offers lesson in resilience, leadership, and finding purpose in what you do. We're excited to explore Yaron's insights on leadership, personal growth, and the evolving landscape of coaching. Please join me in welcoming Yaron to the podcast. Welcome, Yaron.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Peter.
It's great having you here. So let's see here. I'm gonna jump straight in here,
Okay.
and what it was the turning point that made you shift from IT to coaching? How did that shape your leadership, and why?
Yeah, you kind of gave away lots of things in your intro, so thank you for that intro. Um, but maybe I'll share a quick personal story, which is when I was growing up, I had two options, and that's how it goes in my family. I could either become an engineer or I could become an engineer. So I had lots of options growing up, and of course I made the right choice and I became an engineer. I did have the option to choose what type of engineer I'd become, and I became an IT engineer, and I worked in the IT industry for many years. So I did my bachelor's and then my master's. I started off with smaller companies and afterwards in bigger companies like IBM, where we share the same legacy. And I moved around the world, so many countries, different organizations. I was growing up in the latter. My bosses loved me. My job was great. The pay was great. So life was good. But at some point, I felt that it wasn't. And it's not so much that I felt that I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing. It's my body that was telling me that I was off. So it started off with carpal tunnel syndrome. I couldn't type. Later on, I had numbing in my face, so MRI tests and trying to figure out if I had a stroke or lots of different tests that I was going through, but
That
nothing.
must have been a tough period.
Yeah, it was very confusing because outwardly everything was fine, everything was perfect. But then again, the body was telling me something that I was not willing to listen in any other way. And what was happening as as it progressed is that I started losing my energy. And at some point, I remember that specific day that I decided to stay at home. I called my boss. He is still a great person. I told him, look, I can't come. I'm not feeling well. I covered my head with a sheet, stayed in bed, and I spent there maybe an hour or two. And a friend of mine called, and she needed my help. So I picked up the phone and we started conversing, and the phones were this big when this was happening. And we started conversing, and when I talk on the phone, I start pacing. So I paced from my bedroom to the kitchen and back to the bedroom, and I continued asking her questions. I was coaching her, but I didn't know back then what coaching was. And after about half an hour of back and forth, I was able to help her find a solution. So she wrote me this beautiful thank you letter. I still have it to this day after that conversation. And I hung up the phone and I asked myself, what just happened here? Because half an hour ago, I was depressed in bed, no energy. I didn't feel like doing anything. Fast forward into the present, I'm in the kitchen. I'm fully awake. I'm fully alive. I'm not hot. I'm not cold. I don't feel pain. So something clearly happened, but it wasn't clear what exactly was that shift. And that was one of my moments where I realized that when I position myself up close to people, and I help them move forward. I help them nudge them forward in a way. That's when I'm at my best. And
So you had all that, which a typical project environment,
I was working at
where you kept,
200%, which was normal in the high
yeah,
tech industry. So that was the normal
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Mm.
But again, when I enjoyed it, the periods that I enjoyed it, I didn't mind it as much. Once I took that shift, I realized that's not sustainable. And that's where I decided to make a shift in my life. And that's not to say,
Mm.
Peter, that today I don't work sometimes 200%. I still do
No,
that.
no.
But when I position myself, we just had this quick conversation prior. This month I was 5 days at home, so working a lot with lots of clients, 5 different clients in 1 month. So it's a lot to take on, but it feels totally different. It feels
But you're pointing at an important piece, because stress and those symptoms does not really come up, when you're in a positive, motivated environment. Uh, that is what we call positive stress.
yeah,
But it's the negative stress which really can hit you, and identifying that in an early learning how to identify, because all of us gonna run into that negativity or that negative stress. That could be family, it could be work, it could be the project, it could be whatever, really. But feeling it and then learning, which you have done. Okay, now I'm feeling something. How do I just switch it off or tune it to the right level? So, how did you find the courage to embrace coaching? Because it must have been a burnout. You really got there, wasn't it?
it was a burnout, and it took a while. So in the story, it just happens in an instant, but it was a process where I had to scale down and slowly start doing something different. It wasn't really courage, I would say. It was more a need. And as you were mentioning, I was focusing on my best self. So where am I?
Mm,
And that's something I still teach. Um, just to recap what I was just saying, what I do today is I coach one-on-one. I work in groups as a group facilitator, and I lecture. For example, at INSEAD, which is next to Paris, and other places. And what I teach there is resilience, exactly what as you mentioned,
mm,
and reconnecting with your best self. So how do you find those moments in your life where you're at your best, where you have your full energy, you're fully energized, and how to use those moments in your life? And what I find is that when I'm using those best self moments, I call it the moments of light. When I use those
mm.
moments in my life intelligently, it's important to not to abuse them. That's a different subject. But if I use them intelligently, I'm able to exert my energy, use my energy in a productive way that's helpful for myself and for other people around me, if that makes sense.
Well, it absolutely makes sense. Way. Um, so, taking that a step forward in your roles, we can talk about managing, which, a project is very much managing a project, but it's also leading a project. And it could be in your new role also. When was the first time you really felt, now I'm actually leading stuff here? I'm not just managing it here.
Yeah, I think the qualification or the line that you cross between managing and leading, because as you said, managing is moving people or items or projects along. And that's very basic. It's not easy, but it's very basic for me. Leading is more about influencing. And when you start influencing people, you start seeing the light in their eye, that those sparks. That's where I feel that I'm at my leadership or my best leadership position. And that's
Mm,
something that I teach the people that I work with. How do you engage? How do you influence? Sometimes you have authority, it's easier, quote unquote. Sometimes you don't. So you have to lead just by being able to influence without authority. And how are you able to move people forward? And that again comes back to the best moments or the best self. It's so much easier to lead and it comes naturally. It's not a question of needing to do something different. It's just coming from a different position.
And if we look then into the coaching side, and that could be today, but could also be, in your move years back. But what do you see today as the biggest challenge in established credibility? Now you're getting a name, and you're getting established. So there is maybe an underlying credibility in there. But at least when you started off, what was the difficulty here? Gaining that credibility.
Yeah, I
Why
don't.
would people listen to Yaron today? Maybe it's a more straightforward because you got your platform.
Yeah, I think it was about speaking my authentic truth, that allowed me to just say what I feel, and also it's always around connecting to whatever is happening to me. So if I go through a difficult time, I will share it with other people. I will not try to create this poster. Everything's beautiful and perfect. I share a lot of stories from my own life, and
Mm.
that I think helped break those barriers, initial barriers. I share stories that you shared at the beginning. I have teenage kids. They weren't teenagers when I started off. That was a major stress factor when I had to shift from IT with um,
Mm.
the pay slip that I used to have to something new. So there's a lot of stress around that, but also just about those experiences, getting those life experiences that I have with, for example, with my kids and sharing them. I'll give you just an
Mm.
example. One of my coachees asked me, "How do you always succeed in everything you do?" And I found that very weird question, because
Mm.
firstly, I don't. That's
It's a
only thing.
perception, yeah.
It's a perception, and
Yeah.
that's what she sees. Of course, she sees my successes because that's what comes out, but she doesn't see those places that I struggle myself. And one of the answers that came back to me was, my kids were very young, and I used to take them to the kindergarten in the morning. And I told her, whenever I want to win, always succeed, I go with my kids to the kindergarten and I play there with their toys, because then I'm
Mm.
always winning. I'm always the best. There is no challenge. But if I want to stretch myself, if I want to bring myself to the next level, I have to leave that kindergarten and I have to go out and look for those challenges. And there I will fail. I will have to go through difficulty. I will have to struggle in order to become better. And that's part of life.
Mm.
So we only have to decide, do
Good.
we want to stay in the kindergarten or do we want to
Mm.
grow up?
It's interesting. I had another interview, another guest here, and she was talking about how she was a misfit.
Yeah.
She didn't really fit into the organization until she realized that was what actually one of her core strengths. And today she is, a superpower within HR and so on. So recognizing that, well, I don't fit in, but maybe that is my strength also, which I clearly hear what you're saying. So when you look down through your glasses now, you do coach leaders. So what are the most common mistakes you see by leaders, and what are they looking for to become, I don't know if we call it great leaders, good leaders, better leaders, or evolve as a leader?
Yeah. So firstly, the person that you mentioned, I work a lot around belonging, because that's something
Mm.
that came up a lot for leaders, for all of us as human beings. Do we belong? So that would be one thing that I work on. It's really hard to pinpoint what I do with leaders because each person is very different. I would say that most of my work is around awareness. So there are fears, there are patterns, and what I look at when I meet other leaders is, what are your patterns, your leadership patterns, and sometimes
Mm.
they're based on their upbringing, their family. I can see that very quickly, and I will focus there. Usually, it's a very quick focus meeting that I can very easily see what the patterns are, and then find more awareness there. I'll just give you an example. I had one of the leaders, very successful, but in his but at some point he's not able to go over the VP SVP level. He's just not reaching
Mm.
that point. And we started looking for why is that? What's preventing him from going to that level? And what we realized is that he lived in a very, very difficult family, very loving on the one hand, but very limiting. So his father was very tough and demanding, and he's very young. So older sisters, his voice was not important. So he was always great as number two, but never as number one. And every time he tries to um, cross that boundary, something inside him says, don't. Your voice is not as important as others. Be quiet. And once he was aware of that his history was clear to him, but that connection was not. And once he was aware of that pattern, he was easily able to jump through that barrier and position himself in a higher position, or put himself in a higher position. So most of my work is about bringing more light, more awareness, connecting people to their bright side, as we said, the best self, the moments of light, and making sure they're using their best selves in an intelligent way, rather than sometimes we're great at working with people, but we take it too much. And it becomes from a superpower in overdrive. So we have to be careful of gauging that correctly. And then the basic things that we talked about.
Yeah. So coming back then to the most common leadership mistakes, it really comes into what you say here, not recognizing your potential limitations yourself. I mean, knowing yourself, knowing more, okay, this is I'm greater and here I need maybe more support. Is that one of the conclusions?
I think know thyself, right? The Oracle of Delphi is the basic knowledge we all have to use. Where do I use my where am I aware of myself? Where do I lose awareness? And how do I gain more awareness in a way that could help me, but mostly other people around me? And when you start doing that as a leader, that changes everything. It's less about you, it's more about them. And again, things become so much more less complicated in a way.
So that you are into my next question. So what sets apart a greater leader from a good leader?
Yeah. I would say the dividing line would be the awareness and the usage of your best self, or the awareness of your best self, and that intelligent usage of those moments of light. I think that's what creates inspiration. There's people that we look up to are those people that are really aligned with their vocation, with their purpose, rather than doing things that they need to do, they have to do, and so forth.
And that goes into really also the empathic leader, I presume. We've seen a big increase in training and courses like kind leadership, or leadership of kindness, emotional intelligence, which has a lot of focus on yourself. And then bringing, and when you talk about, for example, kind leadership, you say, well, does that work? But there is no, you can have very clear boundaries as a kind leader because you're empathic and you're also clear in your voice. So,
but I would say that I would say that there's a differentiation between. So firstly, what you mentioned is I work with organizational well-being. So that's the well-being of the organization and of the employees, but also kind versus nice. You can be kind to people. You don't have to be overly nice and then not be able to be a true leader. A true leader sometimes needs to make difficult decisions, but it doesn't mean that they have to stop being kind. And that's very confusing for leaders, especially nowadays.
Yeah, but I think it's important, and you're spot on in your analysis there. I mean, you are working as we all do in some way. So how do you say balanced on the day? How do you balance your life?
Yeah. So there's a lot of work which is intellectual in what I do, and I have to mix it up with spending time with my loved ones, which is very important for me. And I always make sure, even in the busiest periods, to do that, which is always fulfilling and filling for me. I do, as you said, I'm an avid runner, so I run a lot. When I train for a marathon, I tend to go out running at midnight, more or less. Those are my hours,
That's
and run until
incredible.
3 a.m. Uh,
With the
yeah,
headlights.
with those headlines, with the creatures of the night, and those are my best times. I meditate. I'm also a yoga teacher. I don't practice that as much today, but I do practice it in my life. So those are the things that keep me balanced, but mostly just being with people that inspire me, leaders that inspire me, and they make me want to be a better leader, a better coach, a better person. And that always is helpful and supportive.
Yeah. And what you now are learning in your life here, how do you pass that on to your children, the leadership lessons? Uh,
Yeah.
how does
Um,
that work? Do they listen to you? They are teenagers.
yeah. So my kids are very weird, and I hear lots of stories. We have these amazing conversations. I have leadership conversations with my wife, with my children. There is no differentiation. They get me, they understand it. They teach me ways of leadership. I'll just give you an example. My son told me today that he was late for school, and I asked him why. And he said, well, I had an umbrella. It was raining hard in Paris. And I saw this child that sprained his ankle and he needed help. So instead of being on time to school, I went with him and followed him with an umbrella. So for me, that's the basic leadership lesson. And I would prefer that he would miss school 1,000 times and teach me this lesson rather than be on time every time.
That's a beautiful example. Now, Yaron, I'm going to put you on some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Well, no, yes. Who knows?
We'll start very easy. Tea, coffee, or something stronger?
Um, Usually coffee, but I try to have periods where I don't take anything. I would just test myself because every addict would say I can stop whenever I want. So I would have periods with no coffee, no sugar, no other things, just to see if I can test myself and come out after 2 weeks, for example, or a month clean of those substances.
One book that changed your perspective on leadership?
I have so many. I would choose maybe one, maybe less known. I feel like it's not known enough. In Everyone Culture, it's by the people that wrote The Immunity to Change. So Robert Keegan and Lisa Lee and other colleagues from Harvard. And the idea is around how do we, again, we talked about this at the beginning, make sure that people belong in the workplace, that people don't have to exert energy hiding some part of their life instead of just bringing their whole self to work. And I think that's very important. And when I read it, I said, oh, finally somebody wrote a book about it.
That's great. What's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I have a good friend. I've just met him a while ago with 5,000 other people. His name is Sting. Maybe you've heard of him. And he says, or he sings, be yourself no matter what they say. And I think that's one of my core beliefs.
Great. Yeah, I've been listening live to him. And finally, what's your go-to mantra when things get tough?
My go-to mantra. I have a teacher. His name is Gwenkaji. He used to live in Burma and later on in other countries. But he used to say aniche. Everything is impermanence. So this will also pass. This too will pass. And I find it true in my life.
Thank you, Yaron.
Thank you,
It's
Peter.
incredible having you here on the Growth Leader Show, getting your insights and sharing your personal experiences. A big thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having me.